Okay, I'm going to show you a new feature that I've added for moving objects forward and backwards. Let's look at the transform layer tool. And first I'm going to show you something that's been in the transform layer tool for a while. If you hold down the Alt key, then when you click and drag a layer, you're moving it in Z. So when you move a layer backwards, it becomes smaller, of course, and when you move it forward, it becomes bigger. You'll notice that it is appearing to move towards the center of the camera. So if I move it back quite a bit, it's moving towards the center. Now it's not really moving towards the center. What you're seeing here is a perspective effect. Everything sort of in the distance all fades towards this center point. So I'm moving it straight backwards. It just appears to be moving towards the center because of perspective. If we rotate the scene now and look at it from a different angle, you can see that it hasn't really moved towards the center. It's just that because it's farther back from the other three squares, when we're in the camera view, it appears to have moved to the center. So because of perspective, it gets smaller and moves inward. So what some people have been asking for is a way to move objects backwards, but not change their visual size. So what you can do now, this is coming in version 9.3, is if you hold down Alt and Shift together, now when you click and drag it to move backwards, the first thing we'll see is that it's moving backwards, but not towards the center. So it's actually changing its X and Y position as well as Z to make it move straight away from the camera. Now I've still got the mouse down. When I let go of the mouse, you're going to see something that you might not expect at first. It pops back and it seems like nothing happened. What it did is, let's look at it from the side view again. Now the object has moved backwards. You can see it's further back from the others. It has also moved in X and Y, and it has scaled itself larger so that it appears the same at the very end. So when we look here, it looks like nothing has changed. I'm going to undo it, and it looks exactly the way it did before. Same if we move it forwards. It gets bigger apparently because it's moving closer towards us, and then when I let go of the mouse, it shrinks itself back down to have the same apparent size. Let's look at it from an outside view again. So now the square I was moving is, you can see that it's closer to the camera, but it's also smaller in order to preserve its apparent size. I'm gonna undo that again. Now the reason when you're moving the object, let's say I'm moving it backwards, it does seem to get smaller. And then when I let go of the mouse, it pops to the same size. The reason it does that pop is when you're moving it, when you're initially moving the object, if it maintained the same visual size, it would seem like nothing was happening at all. But now you can tell I'm moving it closer, or now I'm moving it further away. Closer, further. And only on mouse up does it pop to the same size. I originally had it resize itself during the movement, and that was just confusing because you'd move the object and nothing would seem to happen at all. So why do you want this to happen? Let's open up a more practical example of the purpose of this feature. So here's some scenery made up of a bunch of image layers, and if I rotate to look at it from an angle, you can see that it's flat. The images are all have the same Z depth. So now, if I use this tool, select, say, the background. If you wanted to arrange these in depth, so to make the clouds further away and the mountains a little bit closer, the tree closest of all, you would have to move the layers and then reposition and resize them to get this same composition. But let's say you're happy with the composition, you just want to change the depth. That's what this new feature is for. So I'll hold down, I've got the transform layer tool selected, and I'll hold down Alt and Shift, and I'll move the background way far back. I can tell that it's way far back because it's getting tiny. And then on mouse up, it looks just like it did before. Now the moon, let's move that pretty far back too, but not quite as far as the background. And it pops. The clouds. The hills. And the tree, just for fun, I'm actually going to move it a little bit closer. There. Now, I've moved all the layers, but the composition looks the same. If I rotate it at an angle, you could see that, I'm going to zoom out a little bit too. The composition is not the same, that there's a big change in the Z depth of these layers. Apparently the background, in order to have the same visual size, was scaled up really huge. One of the clouds, I think, is quite far back also. This one here. So if we go back to the camera view, the composition is exactly the same, but what's the point? The point is, if I now were to move the camera around, I get parallax. So far things appear to move slowly, and close by things appear to move quickly. And I can move into the scene, I can move forward and back, and you can see the elements shifting relative to each other. So if you've worked with arranging scenery in 3D before by shifting some things closer and some things further away, this makes that a lot easier to do, because you can set up your composition in 2D and then change the depth afterwards using the transform layer tool, holding down Alt and Shift, and it'll adjust the depth without changing the apparent visual size of an object.